Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate Day number 581. 581. Thursday, October the 18th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. A lot to get to tonight, so let's go ahead and jump right on in. Alrighty. Okay, well, we had a story out yesterday, and a lot of you people, I'm sure, saw it. Just more evidence of how unhinged and dangerous the left-wing lunatics are. And this particular story is talking about the two Republican volunteers, campaign workers, who were assaulted in Minnesota. Now, as I'm coming to you now, one of them individuals has already been picked up and arrested. And I assume that they'll file assault charges. I think that was the woman who was assaulted. The one who was putting out signs, and then the guy was taking up the signs, and then he was kind of verbally abusing her, making threats. Then I guess he walked down the street, went to a gas station. She followed him there. She then attempted to take a photo of him, which I assume she did get his pic. And then he was like reaching in her car and attempting to assault her or what have you. That individual has been apprehended, and I assume he certainly has been arrested. We'll find out what he's being charged with, and he should be charged. This is not how you practice, election politics. People want to go put signs out. They put signs out. If you don't like that sign, don't look at it. Go put out some signs for someone you do support. But you don't go ripping other people's signs out. You don't go threatening people who are participating and just doing their thing. I mean, leave people the hell alone and mind your own damn business. This stuff is just going too far. I'm sure most of you feel the same way. The other person was a male. And he was somehow, I don't know if he was assaulted, but he was punched. That's right, he was punched. So this stuff's just going too far. You can see it going farther and farther, and it's just a matter of time before someone's going to get really messed up. I mean, look what happened to Rand Paul. Look what happened to Steve Scalise. That could have been much worse. And at some point, the Democrats need to stop advancing this hateful an aggressive message that they're putting out. And a lot of it's coming, too, from the left-wing media. And they deny it, but it's undeniable when you watch what they say and you look at what Maxine Waters and what Eric Holder and what these people say. I mean, the Right Reverend Clinton, they're basically, in a very subtle way, saying go out and attack these people. Go out and harass these people. Go ahead. The Republicans, they like Trump, so it's okay to go ahead and smack them over the head with a shovel. Oh, it's okay maybe to shoot them, knife them. Oh, it's okay because they're Republicans and they like Trump. They voted for Trump. So therefore, they deserve to be spat upon, beat up, or whatever. This is way out of hand, and the way to solve this problem is to finally have a crackdown on this. Start really prosecuting these people. Put their ass in jail. And this stuff with Antifa is getting out of hand. We saw what happened in Oregon over the weekend. It's just getting out of hand, and if they don't put a stop to it pretty soon, it's only going to get worse. As long as these people know that they can do this stuff, and they think it's okay, and they can get away with it, and they're being cheerleaded on, literally by politicians in Washington. I mean, I wonder if Republicans started doing this to Democratic politicians and Democratic poll workers and Democratic campaign workers. I wonder how they would feel about it then. Well, the fact of the matter is you won't see that because that's not how we behave. That's not how we behave. It's how they behave. But someone better put a stop to it, and they better do it soon before it gets out of hand. And I'm not the first one saying this, and I'm not the only one that realizes this. I'm sure most of you realize it as well. And at some point, they're going to run across the wrong person. They're going to come across the wrong person who really is frightened or intimidated. And maybe they got a concealed carry permit, like myself. And maybe they feel threatened, and maybe they decide to take some action. It could go either way. It's not safe for the other side either. When you're being a bully like that, you might mess with the wrong guy, and he might rearrange your dental work for you, or he might shoot you. Who knows? But the whole thing's getting out of hand. They should prosecute this individual to the fullest extent of the law. And when they find the other person, they should prosecute them too. They better clamp down on this in a hurry. Now, the big story yesterday that broke was about this U.S. Treasury official that was arrested and charged with providing sensitive reports related to banking transactions of Trump associates. Obviously, someone in the resistance working on the inside. Don't know who they're connected to yet, but something tells me we're going to find out that this person was not just a lone wolf acting on their own, feeding some stuff to some journalists. I think we're going to find out that this person's connected to the resistance, connected to other nefarious groups, probably Soros and others. There needs to be a real investigation into this, and they need to follow leads, and they need to find out and round up the associates of this person. So this person, Natalie Mayflower Sowers Edwards, that's her name. She's got like 4 names. Natalie Mayflower Sowers Edwards. I don't know, maybe she's been married 6 times. Who knows? But we'll call her Natalie Edwards and keep it simple. But Natalie Edwards, this U.S. Treasury official, was arrested and charged with providing sensitive reports related to banking transactions of Trump associates. Natalie Edwards worked at the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The reports show her reports were showing up in BuzzFeed, and this caught the attention of investigators. Edwards was charged on 2 felony counts. She leaked documents and bank records on Manafort and Rick Gates, and financial reports on Maria Butina. She, of course, was the Russian woman who was suspected of being an undercover Russian agent, which I think they've backed off on that now. She also leaked financial information on Rob Goldstone, who's the guy who set up the Trump Tower meeting, as well as the Agorlovs, who are the people he represented and the people who put him up to making the call or the sending the email to Trump Jr. Now, Goldstone is saying that he's considering taking legal action. Let's see. Natalie Edwards also leaked financial records on Peter Smith, who's now deceased. And he was a political operative who searched for Hillary Rodham Clinton deleted State Department emails. So she released financial records on Peter Smith, who's now deceased. And he was a political operative who was searching for rotten Reverend Clinton deleted State Department emails. Why would she be targeting him? On whose behalf was she targeting him? Someone needs to really investigate this. You know, because you can understand the Manafort and Gates because their names are out there and all this kind of stuff, even though it's wrong. She shouldn't have done it. These are felonies and she should be held accountable for that. And you can even to some extent understand the Agorlovs, maybe even Goldstone, although these are people that I'm not sure why she would be targeting them, but she certainly did. But what's the most interesting one about this to me is this Peter Smith guy, and it's because of what Peter Smith was doing. He was someone who was searching for deleted emails from the rotten Reverend Clinton, from her State Department email accounts. And, of course, he's now deceased. You have to wonder, you know, certainly she could just be a lone wolf conducting this stuff on her own, feeding some stuff to some journalists at BuzzFeed. But, you know, I don't know. Every time we talk about one of these stories, as we've been going through this whole frame-up thing for the past 2 years, you're always finding that these people all have connections. We're not finding a lot of lone wolves. Glenn Simpson wasn't a lone wolf. Mr. Sussman wasn't a lone wolf. Christopher Steele wasn't a lone wolf. Nellie and Bruce Orr weren't lone wolves. Peter's Been Stroking Us wasn't a lone wolf. James Comey wasn't a lone wolf. Mr. Potato Head wasn't a lone wolf. These people were all working together. All working together. Now, maybe she is a lone wolf, just doing this on her own. But I think that when they investigate this farther, if we get the truth, we'll find out that there's deep state connections, and that this is probably a continuation, and that she's part of the original group of the people who continue to try and execute the coup, or the cover-up, or whatever it's become at this point. Maybe it's just lashing out at anyone. Who knows? Maybe she was motivated by money. She was motivated by something or someone, and they need to get to the bottom of that. She's going to prison. We know that. Well, it looks like Beto O'Rourke was caught in another lie. He says that his mom is a Republican. His mom's a Republican, but she's going to vote for him. But CNN, believe it or not, CNN fact-checked this. Now, when CNN fact-checks you and catches you, you're really weak, okay? So CNN fact-checked this and found that Beto O'Rourke's mother, Melissa, has voted Democrat in 15 of the last 17 primaries. Now, she is in Texas, where they do have open primaries, so I don't know if that has something to do with it, but he's trying to give the impression that his mom's this hardcore Republican when she's really not. She obviously has voted for Obama, donated to Democrats, voted for Democrats, been involved in voting in these 15 of 17 Democrat primaries, voted for Democrats. So obviously just another lie by Beto O'Rourke, or misrepresenting the truth, not being totally truthful. Yeah, she may have voted for a Republican here and there, but that's not the impression he was trying to give. Just another way of misleading and being dishonest, and this is what people hate. This is what people hate, just like we see with Claire McCaskill, what she's trying to do, to try to spin her way out of the fact that Project Veritas caught her and her staff red-handed. Again, misrepresenting the truth. That's what drives people nuts. Just tell us the truth. Tell us what you think. Maybe we support you, maybe we don't. Stop lying. And that just will further seal his fate, although I think Ted Cruz is already pulled away now and is going to win that race. But it's just, it irks you pretty bad that this never ever stops. Even when it comes back and bites these people in the ass and they see their friends, losing their credibility, losing their elections, costing themselves. And then they go out and do exactly the same. It's like they don't learn, or maybe they think there's no other way to do it, or I guess they just think that's the way the game is played, and sometimes you get caught, sometimes you don't. It's just filthy, and it's a shame that we just can't have people honestly tell us what they think. Why do they have to lie about everything? You're going to love this one. Of course, we know that the divorce records were unsealed for Keith Ellison, and now Keith Ellison is out there saying that the claims by his ex-wife should not be believed, and that he is a victim of domestic abuse. Yes, we just went through this whole thing with Kavanaugh, and the Democrats told us, and the lefties told us, that we have to believe women. Have to believe them every time, because they never lie. Only white men lie. Women never lie. Only white men lie. But now, of course, he's black, so maybe that's the difference. Keith Ellison now saying that the claims by his ex-wife should not be believed. Is she white? Because if she's white, then we have to believe her. If she's black, we have to believe her. If she's Arab, we have to believe her. She's a woman. She has to be believed. Sorry, Keith. Sorry, Keith. Your party has just spent the last month and a half, 2 months, telling us we have to believe every charge made by a woman. Have to. And he's a victim of domestic abuse. I wouldn't admit that I'm a victim of domestic abuse by my wife. I wouldn't admit that. His girlfriend, of course, Karen Monahan, says he is an abuser, and there's another ex-girlfriend also claiming that he abused her as well. I guess they're all lying and not to be believed, and that only he can be telling the truth, and that he is the victim in all 3 cases of this domestic abuse. And he also says, he says his wife made him sleep on the couch, which caused him back pain, which he treated with a massage. Oh, man. Yeah, I'll bet he got a massage. Probably from Saggy. Probably a massage from Saggy Daniels. He probably picked up the phone and called Avenatti. Yeah, is this Mike Avenatti? Yeah, this is a Keith Ellison. Uh-huh, yeah. Well, listen, I'm kind of stuck right now. My wife made me sleep on the couch last night. Really messed up my back. I'm in serious pain. Could you send Saggy over to help me out with that? Uh-huh, yeah, thanks. Uncle Bob the Executioner will release his report after the midterms. What's interesting about this is it doesn't say anything about him ending the investigation. That he's just going to release a report. Now, maybe I'm reading too much into this. Maybe releasing the report means he's ending the investigation. But to me, I really want to hear the words he's ending the investigation immediately after the midterms, if not sooner. It should have already been shut down, and he should be facing a grand jury himself. But that's what the story headline is saying, that Uncle Bob will release a report immediately after the midterms. But it doesn't say he's going to end his investigation. Just that he will release a report after the midterms, immediately after the midterms. The Supreme Court is going to hear the case of whether or not tech giants can censor users. I certainly hope that's a no-brainer. They should not be able to censor anyone. What's the Supreme Court going to say? Yeah, their big tech can censor anyone they want. Well, go ahead, because that'll be pretty much the end of these platforms of social media. I mean, that would be death to... Why would Facebook and Twitter want to have a ruling like that? I don't really understand how that benefits their cause at all. I mean, I think they're both going to probably all go the way of MySpace anyway. What we need is better platforms, more platforms where they don't censor you. There shouldn't be any censoring. Now, obviously, there's things like, you make death threats or crazy things like that, but just for your opinion, political speech, some of the stuff that they're censoring is ridiculous. No, it should not be tolerated. And I really hope the Supreme Court gets this right. And if not, then we need legislation. And I hate to say that. I want less government. I don't want the government getting involved. But these companies essentially have monopolies. So one of two things has to happen. Either they have to break up these monopolies, break up Google, break them up, just like they should be doing with big banks. Either break them up or make them or force them to act right. And we shouldn't even have to go that far. It's a shame. They're bringing this on. I don't want this to happen. I just wish that they would just do things right. Just do things right. Don't censor people. It's their censorship that's going to lead to more government that I don't want. It puts us in a really bad situation we don't want to be in. I don't know how many of you saw that little minute-long video clip with Jeff Sessions day before yesterday, where the reporter asked him, she said, has the president told you in any private conversations, ask you to resign or suggest that he wants you to resign? And he, of course, dodged the question. But it was just the way he dodged it and the look he had on his face, because another reporter followed up after he dodged the question, followed up and asked it again, and he said something that was unintelligible, murmured something. I couldn't understand it. And he had this look on his face like he was kind of rattled by it. I'm surprised. I mean, I would be surprised he wouldn't be expecting that question. Of course, that's not a question you would answer. I wouldn't answer the question. I wouldn't have dodged it the way he did. The way he dodged it was just to say, well, the president says what's on his mind. He's very direct. He says what he thinks. Okay? But hey, I've been happy as Attorney General to be moving his agenda forward in the Department of Justice and blah, 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 blah. So he spun off into something else to avoid directly answering the question. And I really think that, which makes me think that they probably had that conversation, and maybe Trump has said, hey, after the midterms, I'd like you to go. That's kind of what I'm feeling from what I saw him do. Now, he should not have commented on the question. I mean, the question was, did the president ever ask you in private conversation? Well, private conversation. A private conversation with the president is a private conversation. And that's how I would have answered that question. I would have said, well, I mean, you're asking me about a private conversation. It's a private conversation. In other words, I'm not going to discuss private conversation I have with the president. It's private for a reason. So no, I'm not going to discuss and talk about anything that we've discussed in private. It's private. Next question. That's how I would have answered it. The fact that he kind of dodged around it, I don't think did much good. And it's one of them. It's one of the many things that are just kind of hanging out there until after the midterms. There's a lot of things that are just kind of hanging out there until after the midterms. And of course, the fate of Jeff Sessions is one of those things. I assume we'll find out pretty shortly after the midterms. Although I think even if he asks Sessions to resign, or if he even fires him, I don't think he will do it until the Mueller investigation is done. And that's why I'm not sure that Mueller is going to be done. I think it's very likely that Mueller could come out and say, well, we're still investigating. We're not shutting down the investigation. We're backing it off, and we're dispersing some things back to the DOJ, and we're sending some stuff for the Southern District of New York, and we've got some other people following up. We're passing some of these things on, but we're still looking into this. I'm not really done, but I'm going to go ahead and produce a report of my findings at this point, but we're going to continue on. I certainly hope it's nothing like that. I mean, that would be ridiculous, but I wouldn't put it past them at this point. Because if the Republicans win the midterms, the situation that Uncle Bob was brought in, one of the reasons he was brought in, of course, was to hold off any investigation into the real crimes and to participate in the cover-up for his friends in the DOJ and the FBI and the intelligence community. So, but the plan was that the Democrats were going to win back the House, maybe the Senate, and it would all go away. But if the Republicans win, it doesn't all go away. Now Uncle Bob has another situation. And will they say, well, Uncle Bob, sorry, but you got to keep this thing going for 2 more years. But, maybe you can release this like preliminary report and say, okay, well, here's where we are right now. We found this and this and this. We didn't find this and this and this, but we're still continuing the investigation. See, that's not going to fly, and I think that could create a lot of big problems. But I don't think that we're going to see anything major until after Uncle Bob is gone. Till his investigation is over, shut down, and complete. At that point, I think then you'll see, maybe Sessions will be gone, maybe he'll resign, maybe Trump will fire him, maybe not. Maybe Sessions will start dropping indictments on people. That's what it's going to take. I mean, he would have to do something fairly major, I think, to, or maybe come back and unrecuse himself and then start prosecuting the crimes. I mean, the status quo is not going to work. He can't continue after the midterms to be recused and continue not to appoint a special counsel or begin really dropping the hammer on these criminals. It's been going on way too long. There's way too much evidence. It's out there. We got Rodenstein sitting on it, blocking it. They're doing everything they can to impede a real investigation into the real crimes. He is the Attorney General. It's his job to get a handle on it. Now, maybe it's all happening behind the scenes and I'm just not aware of it. That's very possible. I just don't know. I really do not know. So it is one of those things that are hanging out there. But I think immediately after the midterms, we're now being told Uncle Bob's going to release his report. And that should be the end of his witch hunt. And once the Uncle Bob witch hunt is over, then Trump would be free to either fire Sessions or ask him to resign, or have Sessions unrecuse himself and actually start prosecuting the crimes if he's not already. It will be probably, Rodenstein probably has to go. Has a great criminal liability. That should come out in the IG report. If it doesn't, then the IG report is not serious, in which case Trump should just declassify everything. Either the IG comes out and tells the truth and tells what happened because they've kicked it into his court, but if he comes out with another lame report trying to continue the cover-up, F it at that point. Release everything, appoint a special counsel, presidential commission, something. And I expect something will happen. But again, I don't expect, I think the order of things is that the first thing that must happen is Mueller has to have, his investigation must be over. His investigation must be over and Trump must be cleared. When those two things happen, investigation over, Trump cleared, then Trump will be free to do whatever he needs to do to bring down the deep state coup, the players who plotted the frame-up against him. But Mueller's investigation has to be done. Trump has to be exonerated. He has to be, because there's no evidence he did anything wrong. And then, of course, then you can deal with Rodenstein and Sessions and decide what you want to do. And I throw Sherlock Christopher Wray in that mix as well. You can decide what you want to do about those three. Because at this point, the perpetrators of the frame-up are walking scot-free, and they should all be in leg chains. And they're not. And that has to be rectified immediately after the midterms. You know, the Right Reverend Clinton is about to feel some heat. She's about to feel some heat. And I've been thinking about this for a couple days. You know, we just learned 2 days ago, that Carter Page is going to sue the DNC and Perkins Coie, based on the fact that he just learned from James Baker telling the Congress that Mr. Sussman of Perkins Coie, working for the Right Reverend Clinton, was passing documents and thumb drives to Mr. Baker himself, including the Steele dossier. So now Carter Page has a slam dunk case against Perkins Coie and the DNC. And that's going to raise several interesting questions. Let me give a couple of them to you. Who was running the Democratic National Committee during that time? Well, we know from Donna Brazile. Donna Brazile told us that once Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz had to resign and Brazile stepped in, that she learned that the Right Reverend Clinton, her campaign, was running everything. All the money was being sent back to, all the money that was being taken in was being sent directly to the Clinton campaign office in New York. And from there, they were deciding how to disperse the money. All the decisions were being forwarded to the Hillary Clinton campaign in New York, and they were making the decisions. So, according to Donna Brazile, essentially the Right Reverend Clinton was running the DNC. Once she clinched the nomination, she essentially took over the DNC. The financials and the strategy, everything was being run out of the Hillary Clinton campaign in New York. Everything of the DNC was being run out of the Clinton campaign in New York after Hillary won the nomination and Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz had been forced to step down. Donna Brazile takes over. This is what Donna Brazile has said. Now think about this. All the other people who've been asked about this around the DNC, which would include Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz, says she didn't know anything about the dossier. She knew that they were paying for some opposition research, but they always do that. She claims not to know anything about Perkins Coie and the dossier and Christopher Steele and all this stuff. She claims to be totally in the dark about all that. She's probably lying, but that's her position. Donna Brazile said, I didn't know anything about that. Yeah, I mean, probably paying for some opposition research, but I mean, I really didn't know anything about all this stuff that was going on. Tom Perez. Oh, well, when I took over the DNC, this stuff's all been going on. I didn't know anything about it. So there you have the three heads. The former head of the DNC, Wasserman Schultz, claiming she knew nothing. We have Brazile, who was the interim head of the DNC, saying she knew nothing. Then we have the most recent, the current DNC chair, Tom Perez, saying he knew nothing. They're all pleading ignorant. They didn't know anything. The Right Reverend Clinton and her people were running everything, according to these three people. That kind of leaves the Right Reverend Clinton holding the bag, doesn't it? If the three previous heads, the current head and the two previous heads of the DNC, say that they knew nothing about all this, dossier, Christopher Steele and all that, kind of makes them off the hook, right? Unless you can prove they're lying. And that only leaves the Right Reverend Clinton holding the bag. Then the only question you have to ask then is who the hell was running the show? One of two things was happening. Either Perkins Coie was hired, paid this money to get opposition research, and they hired Confusion GPS, and it was Perkins Coie running the operation, Mr. Elias, Mr. Sussman, people at the Perkins Coie running the operation. They hired Fusion GPS, who then hired Christopher Steele, and the Right Reverend Clinton is just sitting back, running for president, not knowing any of this. She's probably told, yeah, okay, we're going to get some opposition research against Trump. That's all good. And she knows nothing. She's not getting any information. She's not getting reports. She's not being kept abreast of what's going on, what they're learning. Nothing. She's just out there campaigning, and she's out of the loop. and Perkins Coie is running the show and probably informing the Clinton campaign on what they're learning, telling John Podesta, telling whoever, although Podesta also denies knowing anything about any of this until after the election. So even her campaign head is saying that he didn't know anything about it. Clearly, most of these people are lying, all right? But if they all continue to hold that line and say, no, I really didn't know anything, I mean, then you have to ask yourself, was it Perkins Coie having been hired? Were they the ones running the show? Or was the DNC, which would de facto be the Rotten Reverend Clinton, according to the three, the current and the two previous heads of the DNC, was it the Rotten Reverend Clinton running the show, hiring Perkins Coie to be the middleman? Was the Rotten Reverend Clinton running the show and hired Perkins Coie to be the middleman? Or was it Perkins Coie running the show because they were hired by the Rotten Reverend Clinton, and the Rotten Reverend Clinton and her people were just out of the loop? You see, that's the question you have to answer here. And that'll have a lot to do with who Carter Page is going to be suing. Who is the ultimate person of responsibility is what he's going to be getting to the bottom of. Who is ultimately responsible for pushing the dossier, which of course he was the primary villain named in the dossier. The dossier is mostly about Carter Page, as the cast as the main villain. Was it Perkins Coie running this operation because they were paid by the Rotten Reverend Clinton, and they were running all this on their own? They hired Confusion GPS. They were doing all this stuff, passing the stuff to the FBI, intermingling with all these people, the DOJ and the FBI, and Christopher Steele and Glenn Simpson and all these other people, while the Rotten Reverend Clinton and her people at the DNC are just sort of out there campaigning and not paying any attention, and not a part of any of this. Is it that, or is it the opposite? Is it the Rotten Reverend Clinton and her people, Podesta and probably Sidney Blumenthal and Scheer and all those people, her goons, sitting around Hillary's kitchen table, drinking wine, laughing and joking, putting together this plot, and then saying, okay, we got the plot. Now we just need to execute it properly. Okay, well, we need a third party to put it all into motion so our fingerprints are not on it. Okay, well, we'll hire our good friends over at Perkins Coie. This is exactly the type of dirt that they do for us. So was it the Rotten Reverend Clinton's plot that was given to the Perkins Coie, with their mission being to execute the plot created by the Rotten Reverend and her goons? Or did the Rotten Reverend Clinton just hire Perkins Coie and say, yeah, go get some opposition research and do a good job. Come up with something. Dig up something. And let us know what you find. Somebody instigated this. Who was the instigator? Who instigated this? Who is the ultimate person? Who's the person ultimately responsible? Usually it's the payee. That would be the Rotten Reverend Clinton. Is the folks there, are the folks there at Perkins Coie, Mr. Sussman and Mr. Elias, are they going to sit there and tell a congressional committee or a prosecutor or a grand jury, are they going to say, yeah, you know, it was all us, man. We put all this together. We were just paid to do opposition research. We weren't really, the Clinton didn't know anything about it. The DNC didn't know anything about it. We just went and put all this together. We hired Fusion GPS. They hired Steele. We were working with Orr. We were working with the FBI. We were putting this stuff out. We were feeding it to the media. We were running everything. And Hillary didn't know about any of it. She's just sitting back, running for president, doesn't know anything. Is that what they're going to say? Or is Perkins Coie going to say, hey, we were a law firm. We were hired to handle this work for our client. And our client gave us this work and said, here's what we want you to do. Here's what we want you to do. We want you to carry this out, execute this for us. Got to get to the bottom of that, and Carter Page's attorneys certainly will. There'll be a lot of people forced to sit for depositions, including the Rotten Reverend Clinton, people at the DNC, every one of them, Wasserman Schultz, the whole nine yards, Perez, Brazil. They'll get to the bottom of it, and they will find out who was really running this plot. And I think when we get to the bottom of it, just as I said over a year ago, we're going to find the rotten Reverend Clinton cooked up this plot. Her fingerprints are going to be all over it. This was a rotten Reverend Clinton operation from the get-go. That's my guess.